Hey, this is Dave from Not So Ancient Chinese Secrets and DQ Studios, and I'm here to share with you how we set up our Nikon Df for pro wedding and portrait work. And out of the box, it's usable, but as a full manual shooter, I like to have a little more control. And Nikon's always been great about giving us that control and customizing the buttons around it. So we're going to go ahead and take a look at that. First thing to note is that we are full manual shooters, so this never leaves from the M position once it's there. We also want, I'm a control freak, so I don't just want full stop control of the shutter, so I will pin this to the 1/3 step and it locks in position, which is a good thing. And that means in 1/3 step, our back rotating dial becomes our shutter control in 1/3 increments. Awesome. Now, one thing that you'll notice about the ISO, it's great to have this ISO dial here. The problem is, out of the box, the ISO isn't displayed in the viewfinder. That is a ghastly mistake, and I thought was the dumbest thing ever, until I found that there was a menu option, thankfully, that Nikon gave us, that allows us to swap out the number of images remaining to show instead the ISO. So we're going to do that as well. First of all, we're going to go to menu. Make sure you select the little pencil here, which is the custom setting menu. Then we're going to go down to D, shooting and display. If you go down to the ISO display, the default is off. And I don't know about you, but as a photographer, I like to, control the exposure in manual mode. Yeah. And so if I'm looking through the viewfinder, I want to know the three things that affect my exposure. I want to know not just the shutter and the aperture, but I want to know the ISO at a glance without having to remove my eye from the viewfinder. And right now, you don't get the ISO display. Why, Nikon? This should have been defaulted to on. So now when it's on, I always get the ISO showing up until I press halfway, and then it switches to the number of images remaining. That's much preferred as a professional photographer. So yeah, very strange that that was kind of like that out of the box. Next thing to note is that I like to use the autofocus on button on the back. Why, Dave? Are you crazy? Yes, I am. Well, we always shoot with the autofocus mode, not in manual mode. But if in the traditional autofocus mode, out of the box, pretty much every camera works by pressing halfway and then it focuses, and then press all the way, then it takes the shot. All right, that's kind of cool, but the problem is, what if that object starts moving towards you? Well, Dave, you can use Autofocus Continuous. But to change into Autofocus Continuous, this is not just a toggle, it's actually a button as well. You press that button, you hold it down, and then on the back here, I use the rotating dial and switch it to the C, which is continuous, instead of the S, which is the default, which is single mode. All right, so you got to do that. And then, now it's in continuous focus. Now, what if the guy stops? Well, I can press AE lock and then lock it in position, right? And then I can press the shutter and take, it's getting really complicated. Well, what if we disengaged the shutter button and it only took the picture and it didn't do anything with the focusing? What if we left the autofocus in Autofocus Continuous and just programmed this back button, the autofocus on button, so that it would track whenever we pressed it down? So if something's moving towards you and then it stops, you just let go and then you take the picture. Now, instead of having to focus and recompose like we always have to with the autofocus single mode, I can just shoot, 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 shoot. And as long as the subject doesn't move in distance from where I'm taking the picture, then I don't have to refocus. Now, if the object or the subject starts to come at me, then I just press and hold, and because it's already in autofocus continuous mode, it'll track that subject, and I can continue to lay on the shutter as it's moving. Very cool. It's kind of the best of both worlds. We can use AFS manually by letting go, or we can track by pressing and holding while we're taking the picture. So that's why we like to do that. To do that, let's go into the menu again. This time we're going to go up to the custom setting menu A, autofocus. And if you go down to A4, mine's already changed, but as default, it is chosen as the shutter and the autofocus on button. And that means both the shutter button and the autofocus on button will engage the focusing. I don't want that. I want only the autofocus only button to work. I don't want this to do anything with the autofocus. Perfect. Press OK and you're done. Now you've disengaged that and you get used to that and you can thank me later. Perfect. The third thing we're going to do is deal with some customizable buttons. I'm really glad that they still have the function button and the preview button up here on the front of the camera. And when I'm shooting, sometimes we like to shoot with a lot of flash, but we often will sometimes swap out images that, sometimes shoot ambient light only, and we don't want the flashes to go off. And instead of having to take off the flash or fiddling with the flash itself to turn off all the flashes while I'm shooting, I can program these buttons so that when I press them while I'm shooting and pressing the shutter, they kill the flash so it doesn't send a signal out the hot shoe. And so ergonomically it works really well because my hands can simply just grip the body, and then my third and fourth fingers naturally fall upon the PV or the FN buttons, the function of the preview buttons. And I can optionally also change this AE lock, AF lock, so the exposure and focus lock. And since I'm in full manual mode, it does nothing for me anyways. This can also be programmed to do different things. Let's go in there. Let's find the menu. Go into controls, and this time we're going to go into the F4 button, which is the function button, and press the right, and it even gives you a nice little display there. And I'm going to make sure that this one says flash off. And so we're going to turn the flash off on that one and press OK. Same with the preview button. I'm just going to use them all as a flash off. I've tried other things to use them on, and you can go through the different selections and see what works for you. But for us, really having those different options, depending how late in the day it is and which fingers is sore, I like to have options to be able to kill the flash while taking a picture. So all those are flash off for me. Very cool. The last thing we're going to do is just change one of the playback options on it. Now, by default, when you're in playback mode, one of the reasons why I'll look on the screen in the first place is to make sure that my focus is on, all right? So that means I've got to press play, and then I can just nail on this zoom button, and then I can move around and see, did it focus on what I wanted to focus on? Pretty much, yeah. And then I can zoom back out, all right? But there's a faster way. We can program this OK button to zoom in at a high magnification on the focus point that was active. Now, if you focused and recomposed, obviously it won't be the right focus point, but hey, it's one less thing to do, a lot less button pushing to zoom into the image. Okay, to get there, we want to press the menu button, go into the custom menu for the F controls, the controls again, and here we're going to go into the OK button, the F2. We're not going to mess with any of the shooting modes or the live views, but we're going to go to the playback mode, and I'm going to choose zoom on and off. By default, I think it's thumbnails on and off. I don't need to see thumbnails. I just want to check the zoom, the focusing, when I'm actually in the heat of a shooting. And so I'm going to go over here and I'm going to choose high magnification. Press on. So now, when I take a picture, I'll take one picture here, and I press play. When I press the OK button, it zooms right into the point that was actively focused. So I can quickly zoom around. And even after this, I can get even closer if I want, but not too much closer, just one more zoom level. But it's so much faster than having to, let's say, just press play and then zoom, 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 and then moving it over to wherever it was. All right. So now I can just press play, press OK, turn it, and then, yeah, okay, focus is good. I'm good to go. And I can keep on shooting. And that's pretty much it. That's how we customize the Nikon Df. If you want to learn more about it, we've got a comparison in the shutter sound to our Fuji X100S, the D700, as well as the D4. And there's another video talking about its ergonomics as well. Thanks for watching.